Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. Unlike the Friday edition, we're dedicating the Tuesday podcast to answering your garden questions. Stay tuned to find out how you can get your garden question into the program. So come on, let's do this. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. There's a lot of ways you can get your questions in. Leave an audio question. You can make a phone call. 916-292-8964. 916-292-8964. You don't even need to make a phone call. Go to your computer, yell at it. But first, go to speakpipe.com/gardenbasics, and you can leave us a question that way. You can fill out the contact box at gardenbasics.net and type in a question. Email, sure. Send it to fred@farmerfred.com. And, of course, you can also text us questions at 916-292-8964. But we really would like to hear your voice. We? Who's we? Well, Debbie Flowers here, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, I think still.
Yeah, sitting on your right.
Okay. On a day that promises to either rain a lot or disappoint us a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty dreary out there.
Yeah. This weather has been so strange here lately. The last couple of days have been in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And things are happening out there that don't bode well for the future with, I don't know if you've taken a look at your deciduous fruit trees yet, but many of them have blossoms on them.
Oh, I didn't see blossoms on mine. I saw swollen buds not ready to pop.
Okay. Is that what they call the popcorn stage?
Well, that's when you can see white.
Okay. And that supposedly is your last best opportunity to spray.
Right. And typically here we would spray our dormant sprays on the fruit trees, deciduous fruit trees, around Valentine's Day.
But that is only if that flower is not fully opened.
Right.
Because if you spray copper or oil on a deciduous fruit tree with open flowers, I don't think the flower would like that.
No, it could be very harmful to the flower, yes.
And the other thing that could be harmful would be any frost or freeze that happens.
Right, yes.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yes.
And that means fewer fruit in the summer.
It does. Yes, what happens, what the harvest is, what the acorn production is in the fall, that is all dependent on pollination earlier in the season, typically in spring.
I don't like climate change. It's not dependable.
That's right.
It's just throwing things out of whack. All right, let's get to the question here. Terry is up in Oregon, and he sends us a text, and he says, I was wondering if you have some tips for people who want to have a garden but work 40-plus hours a week and have no help in the garden. Good question, Terry. Do you have any other hobbies? You might want to stop those hobbies.
Yeah, I'm thinking I've been there. I've had the 40-hour work week and nobody to help me in the garden. And I still garden because it's a passion and it's a calming influence on me and it feels creative. So I make the time because it helps me. And I think the first thing I would ask Terry to do is pick the right plant for every location he plans to garden. If you get the plant that puts up with the sun and wind and water and soil conditions at that location, then you're much less likely to have any kind of problems that are going to take your time and effort in the future.
Low maintenance plants, can they be non-boring plants?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically, if you're looking at landscape shrubbery, it's the stuff that, look at what's planted at your local gas station, in front of your library, assuming they don't have a gardening committee at the library. Some do. But at public places that are maintained once a week, once every 2 weeks, and those will be the plants that are the easiest to care for, and see what you like in that group of plants.
It might be low-growing shrub roses.
Yes, it might be.
Yeah.
And they can be gorgeous.
That's right. And it's easy to prune those. Basically, you just hack them back with your shears. That's not a bad thought to do that, too. I would say, somebody did a survey. I think it was the National Gardening Association a few years ago. And they said, how long, and they said this to homeowners. They said, how long do you want to spend doing lawn and garden chores each week? And the overarching answer among that group of 1,000 people or so was under 1 hour a week.
Wow. That's nothing.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, if you want to work less than an hour a week in your garden, the first thing you ought to do is remove your lawn.
Right.
Because the lawn is the most time-consuming part of gardening.
the most resource consuming as well, with fertilizer and pesticide and the mowing aspect of it.
I can't imagine working less than an hour a day in the garden.
Right. Yeah.
You have to love it. You have to get some enjoyment out of it in order to keep pursuing it day after day after day.
Yes.
But it's fun to do. One tip I would use would be to automate your garden as much as possible. That would mean things like an automatic watering system.
Absolutely.
To get you out of the drudgery of dragging a hose all over the yard every other day or whatever to water the plants. If you have a container garden, well, that takes a bit more work into making sure all those pots get watered.
Yes.
And on a different timetable than your plants in the ground get
watered. But that
watered.
Can also be automated, yes.
Right. Yeah, there's an answer to that. Drip irrigation is a good way to go. There's a lot less water waste, and there isn't tragedy if there's a break in your drip irrigation system. Unlike if your lawn sprinkler system breaks, your neighbors may be enjoying Old Faithful for the whole time you're gone.
Yeah, true.
So a good drip system reduces water usage. It reduces unwanted weed growth too. It reduces plant diseases as well. And if you haven't updated your control system, do so. If you still have an old one, it's somewhere in the garage. You vaguely remember it. The new modern irrigation control systems can be run from your smartphone.
Yes, they can.
They can turn off the water when it's raining.
And based on temperature.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get really fancy, you could have soil sensors that sense when the ground where your plants are need moisture, and the system would automatically turn it on.
Yeah, that's big in agriculture, and like the vineyards I have toured, many of them are looking at or already have that kind of a system. But if you don't have automatic watering yet, you can start small. When my father started to get somewhat demented, he would forget to either turn the water on or turn the water off. And so it's just a manual dial that you attach to the hose bib and then the hose to it. And you just go out and twist it and it turns on. It's kind of like the timer on the bathroom fan. Turns on the water runs, ticks its way down, and it shuts itself off. So if you don't have a lot of money or don't want to get all high tech right off the bat, there are simple ways to automate your watering.
One great place to put a system like that is if you have a hose bib right outside a door you use frequently. Like outside the side door of my garage, I can walk out and see the plants I have in half barrels along a fence. And I've got that same exact system at the end of my faucet hooked up to a drip system that waters those half barrels. And I see that big yellow dial every time I walk out the door. So I go, oh yeah, I can turn that.
Give it a twist of 30 minutes or 45 or whatever you want. And it turns off automatically. What's nice too is I haven't had any problems with it leaking. So that's wonderful. The one thing you do need though is if freeze is expected, you want to take that off there so it doesn't crack because there probably would be water inside there. Battery-operated timers, too. If you don't want to go to the expense of a central irrigation control system, there are good battery-operated, and we should point out the one we're talking about where you twist has no batteries. Right. It's totally manual. Yeah. But there are battery-operated ones that you can hook up to outdoor faucets as well and have that run to a drip system, and it can cycle on and off according to the schedule you set. You just have to remember to change the batteries every now and then. Yes, and I forgot that once and paid for it. No, your plants paid for it. My plants paid for it. Yeah, I had no harvest for the rest of the summer. Really? Nothing? Well, very tiny. I thought you said there was one that survived. There was one plant that survived, yes. Okay. But it didn't produce much. Oh, well, that's not unusual. So what's nice, too, on some of these battery-operated units, they might have multiple outlets for watering several drip or hose-connected areas of your lawn. Yes, you can have more than one schedule on some of these timers. You can attach a hose in a couple of places and turn a system on with one schedule of watering and then turn a different system on with a different schedule of watering. When you use different emitters on a drip system, you want them to run on a different timer. All the emitters on one valve should be the same. So I have my bamboo with one kind of, they're in containers above ground with one kind of emitter, and I have my vegetable garden in a bottomless raised bed in a different part of the yard, and with spray emitters on those, and I have the inline drip emitters on the bamboo. So I have them on 2 different schedules of irrigation. And so the timers that have multiple schedules on one timer are valuable for that.
For an even more hassle-free existence using a system like that, a drip irrigation system, don't mix pressure compensating drip emitters with the sprayers, because the sprayers are not pressure compensating. And it's not uncommon if you got a mix of drip emitters and bubblers or those finger-like sprayers on the same line, those sprayers stop working after a while because they're not getting the pressure.
They don't have any pressure yet. Yeah. It's taken by the other emitters.
So you want to keep those, have just basically uniformity on any one line.
Yes.
As far as that goes. And I love pressure compensating emitters because the water that comes out at the start of the system is the same amount of water that comes out at the end of the line.
Even if you turn on your shower and your washer and your dishwasher all at the same time.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned another one that could make gardening a lot easier too, and that's having raised beds.
Yes.
Because when you see plants in a raised bed, you're not so adverse to going out there and sitting on the edge of the raised bed if it's got a wood frame or a brick frame or a rock frame, sitting there and maybe pulling weeds. Whereas if everything's in the ground, you might say, oh, I've got my good tuxedo on. I can't get down on my knees and do that.
Maybe that's rule number 3. Don't wear your tuxedo to work, because then when you come home, you won't pull a weed in your path.
Yes. Yeah, dress for the occasion. Yeah, so make it easy on yourself. Raised beds reduces stooping and kneeling, and especially as you get along in years, you look more forward to going out to the garden where you're having an easier time getting back upright.
Yes, and raised beds allow you to have your own soil mix, whatever that is. It can be field soil or it can be container soil, and it depends on the type of raised bed you have, which would be better, or if you can use either.
The key for not wrenching your back in a raised bed is don't make it any wider than you can reach halfway through the bed.
Right.
And for most people, that's about a 4-foot wide bed.
Right.
You don't want to be stepping in the bed, for one thing, and compacting the soil. And you want to be able to reach the middle while you're sitting on the edge.
Mm-hmm. No feet in bed.
Yep, no feet in bed. Right. The height of the raised bed, it's really up to you. I'd say sitting height is nice, 18 inches or so.
Yes.
I know people that like taller ones, and that's fine because it keeps the dogs out.
Right.
That's the other thing, too, about raised beds versus having a regular garden. If you're having trouble with Rover running through your garden, he's probably easier to train staying out of a raised bed than he would be staying out of a ground level garden.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, by the way. As far as mitigating, say, pest problems, if you're using raised beds, definitely put some hardware cloth on the bottom of it, which is usually 1/4-inch mesh that you can just install that runs along the bottom of the raised bed and comes up the sides, all the sides, to keep the gophers out. Who wants to deal with gophers? Nobody. So let them go visit your neighbors instead. So use that hardware cloth. It's not hard to recommend container gardening, too, if you want to save time. Because that makes things a heck of a lot easier as far as what to reach. It just needs its own watering system.
Right. And
it may need more shade and more sun protection.
And that container better have some drain holes in it.
Oh, please. Yes. Good size holes, too. I'm always amazed at the number of instances where I've come across people who have container gardens and there's no drainage in the pots. Where does the water go? Where do you think the water's going to go? It's not going anywhere. It's going to sit at the bottom and rot the roots.
Right. And then it smells like Dead Sea.
Does the Dead Sea smell like that?
Yeah, no. I don't know. I haven't been there. It smells like dead fish or low tide.
Okay. I imagine the Dead Sea smells like salt.
I would imagine it does as well.
Somebody will tell us, I'm sure. All right. So, yeah, elevating can save you a lot of time in the garden, too. And don't forget about de-elevating. And by that, we're talking about doing what's now called backyard orchard culture, where if you have fruit trees, don't let them get any taller than you can reach, which might be 7 feet, maybe 6 feet if you're short, 8 feet if you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But basically, so you're standing on the ground. You're not risking your life and limb on a ladder. When you have fruit on a 6-foot, 7-foot, 8-foot tree, it's easier to get at. It's easier to net if you're trying to keep critters out. And you are going to get enough fruit for you and your family.
Yes. Yes, that's been proven.
Yeah. So just, as we like to say, de-elevate. And you can do it over time. If you have fruit trees that are way out of height right now, it might take 3 years or so.
Right.
Doing a judicious winter pruning. Using what sort of cuts?
Thinning cuts, where you take the whole branch out.
Because that actually slows down the growth.
The regrowth.
That's what you want to do. Yeah.
Right. And it spaces it apart. When you do a heading cut, which is just a random cut across a branch anywhere, the regrowth will come from below that cut, and it'll be multiple buds breaking at once. So instead of having one stem where you used to have one stem, you'll now have 4 or 5 stems. And so there's crowding, which leads to trapped water and disease. It traps insects so they can thrive because the beneficials can't get to them. It creates a mess.
And broken branches.
Yes, they're very poorly attached, right?
Yeah, so that thinning cut as opposed to a heading cut, which is just going willy-nilly through the tree and making cuts with no goal in mind, by removing where a branch meets a larger branch and removing it there, you're helping to spur growth lower than that, too.
Yes. Well, and I've been working on my apricot, which I've lived in this house 12 years at least, and it came with the house, and it had branches over branches. Top branches were producing quite well because they're out in the sun, but the branches below would produce a little bit, but there was a lot of fungal problems, a lot of brown rot problems, and not a lot of crop down where I could reach it. So I have over time been cutting out those over the top branches and getting light to what's below. And so it produces more branches below, which are more in the range that I can reach them from the ground.
I guess the ideal shape for a fruit tree is sort of martini glass shape, whatever you want to call it.
Or umbrella.
Umbrella shape. But you do want to thin out the interior to allow that air and sun to get in to the inside. Because why should all of the fruit be at the top of the tree? It doesn't have to be. It's for the birds if it's up there. So, okay, we've done automate, elevate, de-elevate. Why not eliminate? What about these problem plants that you hope will get better one day and they never do? Why keep fretting over some sort of a habitually underperforming plant? There's no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Life's too short for problem plants. You came up with that.
Life is too short. Yes, it is. Life is too short to put up with a problem plant. And as you said, right plant, right place.
Yes.
So you get one that's better suited to your climate, better suited to the amount of sun it's going to get in your yard.
It may be, the problem plant may be a problem because it's not the right plant for that location.
One bit of good exercise, but it can certainly save you a lot of time in the garden, is to add mulch. And adding 3 or 4 inches of mulch can certainly keep weeds under control.
Yes, it can. Improves the quality of the soil, prevents compaction when you walk on it. It increases the biology in the soil. It helps a whole lot of things.
And like we said way back when, if you really want to save time, get rid of the lawn. Put in plants that are going to do a lot more to get you more food. Well, how is that? Well, flowering plants attract beneficial insects that can battle the bad insects. They attract pollinating insects, which means you're going to get more fruits and vegetables that they hover around. If you have plants in your garden, do you ever see any bees working your lawn? No.
Not unless there's some clover in there.
Yeah, but if there's no flowers in the lawn, and there usually aren't.
And clover has flowers, yes.
Yeah. All right. I know.
Sterile.
I hear you yelling at me from your car. You need that lawn for your dog, your cat, your kids. They could survive on a little smaller area.
Right size the lawn, as the tech companies now say. Put in just what you need, maintain that portion, but not extra.
Right. Just decide really what all do you need. And I guess finally would be delegate. Terry mentioned that, he doesn't have any help in the garden. Somewhere in your neighborhood, there's probably some kid that wants to make some money.
Right.
Teenagers are really good at moving stuff, rocks and mulch and even pulling weeds.
And sometimes mowing lawn.
And sometimes that's how I got by from age 8 to 15, I think, was mowing lawns in the neighborhood. But, ask around. Also, there's usually somebody in your neighborhood, even in suburban purgatory, that has a bigger implement. It might be a chipper shredder. It might be a small tractor. It might be a backhoe.
Right.
Those are the people to make friends with. and get them over there to help you out when you need it. So ask your neighbors, too, for recommendations for professional landscapers and arborists. Check their credentials online. Seek them out. But parceling out yard work to others, it is tough for gardeners. But come on, grit your teeth, open your wallet. It'll save your back, and it'll save you some time.
Right.
Money heals all wounds. All right. Anything else to save Terry some time here?
Boy, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head.
And going back to your right plant, right place thing, too, is don't experiment more than your tried and true garden. You can have an experimental garden where you're growing things that you've never seen growing in your neighborhood, but keep that at a lesser percentage than things you see growing in your neighborhood.
And that's probably a place where I make my biggest mistake, because I always want to try different things and see what happens.
If you would quit going to nurseries, that wouldn't happen.
Or just reading seed catalogs.
Yes. It's amazing. But yeah, so Terry, I hope that information helps, and we can save you some time in the garden. Thanks, Debbie.
You're welcome, Fred.
Want to leave us a garden question? You'll find a link at gardenbasics.net. Also, when you click on any episode at gardenbasics.net, you're going to find a link to SpeakPipe. You'll find it in the show notes. And when you bring up SpeakPipe on your computer or smartphone, you can leave us an audio question without making a phone call. Or you can go to SpeakPipe directly. That's speakpipe.com/gardenbasics. You want to call or text us? We have that number posted at gardenbasics.net. It's 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. Email? Sure, we like email. Send it along with your pictures to fred@farmerfred.com. Or again, go to gardenbasics.net and get that link. And if you send us a question, be sure to tell us where you're gardening, because all gardening is local. Find it all at gardenbasics.net. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and it's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net, and that's where you can find out about the free Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And thank you so much for listening.